The August 17th, 2021 Committee on Ways and Means is now called to order. I'd like to call on Councilmember Shade for our invocation.
This is my second invocation. I'm gonna start asking for a stipend. Thank you, Councilmember and Chairman. Almighty Father, we ask that you look upon your servants here today who are assembled, that we may do the will of the people, and that in our process, we be people of goodwill. In your name we pray, amen.
Amen. Item number 2, approval of minutes.
Move for
July
approval.
20th and 29th.
Just the 20th.
Okay.
Second.
Moved and properly seconded. All in favor, say aye. The ayes have it. Bids and purchases.
I'll move for approval of those 8 items.
Moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye. The ayes have it. Item 4, Parks Department approval the
I'll move for
deposit.
approval.
Any discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye. Item 5, Planning, Preservation, Sustainability, Business and Neighborhood Services. Approval of
Approval.
Resolution
Second.
Committee. Moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on item 5? Not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Item 6,
Move for
Planning,
approval.
Preservation.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. The ayes have it. Item 7, Office of Cultural Affairs approval for a
Chairman.
grant in the amount of $100,000.
Second.
Sure. If there's a motion to take 7 through 10 together, do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Moved and probably seconded. All in favor of 8? No, I'm sorry. 7, 8, 9, and 10, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Item 11, stormwater management approval to
Second.
award a contract to the low bidder ES Integrated for drainage overhaul improvement and maintenance work. Any discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye. Item 12, stormwater management approval to award a construction contract to
Move
the
for
low bidder.
approval.
Second.
Moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Item 13.
I'll move for approval.
Second.
Moved and properly seconded. Any discussion regarding stormwater management approval to enter an agreement and accept a grant award from FEMA? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Item 14, Police Department approval
Second.
to submit an application. The Justice Assistant Grant Formula and the grant amount is $35,576. Any discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye.
I'll
Do I hear a
second.
second? Okay,
Mr. Chairman, what was the motion?
the motion is to take 15, 16, and 17 together,
And 18.
and 18 together, okay? And we did have a second. Any discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye. The ayes have it. Item 19, Audit Committee report, Daniel Island Recreation Center.
Move for approval.
This-
Second.
I think this
It's
is just for,
information only.
yes.
It's information only. It's been received. Item 20, Chairman Shea.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
before you
Mayor.
start, I just want to let the body know I need to recuse myself on number A,
Okay.
letter A.
20A, the mayor recuses himself.
Thank you.
Chairman?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Real Estate Committee met yesterday afternoon at 3 o'clock. Item A was the request for approval for the purchase and sale between the City of Charleston and Shipyard Creek Associates. This was for $6.18 million. This is a property known as a Basso American Corporation property. This property came in under appraised value of $7.5 million. We have a contingency contract of earnest money of $50,000 for the purchase of this property. With this, we were made aware that this property may have some environmental concerns because of its prior use. So the contingencies on this were to do an assessment, environmental assessment for the property. There is a long-term lease that is still pending. If we do purchase the property, that we'll be stuck with for a number of years. We had, after discussion with the several contingencies, including the lease and the environmental concerns with that, it was moved that we accept the purchase of this 10+ acres of land with those contingencies incorporated, and the majority voted to approve number A.
Question? The property is located in North Charleston.
But thank you. I'm glad you pointed that out to me, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, so one of the contingencies on the property is that I think Pittsburgh Avenue is like a dividing line between the city of Charleston, where our existing boundary is located, and this is on the North Charleston side. So one of the contingencies with this, I'm glad you brought that to my attention, is to annex the property into the city of Charleston.
So which goes first?
Sir?
Which goes first?
Well, we're working on all three of this, as my math teacher would say, simultaneously together at the same time.
So we're gonna pay 600, what is it, an acre?
6.1 million,
6 million, and what is that per
and
acre?
the appraised value was 7.5. So we're getting it for a discount of almost $1.5 million below market value, appraised value. You've got the lease, you've got environmental concerns, and you also got the property being located in the city of North Charleston and to get it annexed. And we have until, I think, March of 2022 to exercise our due diligence with all three of those contingencies being incorporated. So if we do our due diligence and find it doesn't work, we get our $50,000 back.
Okay, the next question is this the only property for consideration?
This is,
And if so, why?
my understanding is that this property will satisfy the needs of the Public Works Department and other departments, because it is 10.0 acres of land. Is larger than we have at Milford. So there is another piece of property that we have, but that size is not considered. I can't answer what other properties the real estate division has looked at. I know that this is the property that they've identified and what we voted on for yesterday.
Who identified?
I presume it was from the real estate division of the finance department.
And did they consider any other properties is my question.
No, sir, not to
In
my
other
knowledge.
words, where I'm headed with this is, first of all, we have a property in another city that we're going to depend on the annexation, to agree to the annexation by the city of North Charleston, okay?
And we would.
We also
yeah.
have a property that we know has toxic problems, environmental issues. Do we know the extent of that? Do we know what the cost will be to do the eradication of the?
So discussion we had on the environmental component of it is that we would be able to apply for funds through DHEC for some of the cleanup. We did ask questions about the history of this property and whether or not a majority portion of the property did go through an environmental cleanup already. We don't know the percentage of that. We don't know how much of that is incorporated. If we signed this contract, it is a contingency that we do our due diligence with all of that work. If the deal falls through, we find out that the property is not satisfactory because we can't annex it into the city, or because the environmental concerns are overwhelming, we get our $50,000 back. We have between now and March of 2022 to accomplish that.
I mean, for me, there's just so many ifs regarding the property. And I think personally that before we decide on any specific property, the council should have the ability to look at other options regarding, we're talking about a $6 million investment on a property that we know has some toxins. We know what the cleanup cost was for Magnolia. I mean, in the millions, tens of millions of dollars. I just want to make sure that we're not getting ourselves in a situation where it's really not cost effective to do it, particularly without looking at other potential properties that would serve the purpose. And all we've got as a council is one.
Right. And Mr. Chairman, what I would recommend with that is if we go ahead and execute this contract, we can get out of it and no loss to us. The will of this committee and the will of council is that you direct the appropriate departments to look at other land in the process of doing that. That's perfectly fine. We can do that. There's nothing with to my knowledge, and I'll look at our legal counsel,
But why
but we're
can't-
not prohibited from looking at other land at the same time.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm monopolizing your time. Councilman Seekings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I didn't want to get in the way of that debate.
You're sort of in the crossfires, actually, Councilman.
Right here, getting hit. So I sort of agree with our chairman here. Is there someone on staff who can tell us what diligence was done in advance of even negotiating this contract on other properties that we could have used, which my understanding is to be for our public works storage, right? So we're going to park trucks and sand and all those kind of things. For a piece of property that's out of the city, that isn't annexed in, that has some history to it, I'm sure, that we don't know about. I mean, what other diligence do we do? Do we have a broker? How do we get this deal? Anybody? You know, I think,
Legal?
Mr. Chairman, before we spend $6 million on a piece of property, I think we need to have some answers on the diligence that was done, the options that we have. And I don't think entering into a contract with the hopes we might be able to get out of it is a prudent business move on our part. I'm going to vote no on this.
Councilman Griffin?
Sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Unless there's a reason why we would need to go into a contract tonight, I don't see why we can't just defer item A and bring it back up. I mean, we have to have somebody from real estate be able to be present and answer these kind of questions. We don't have anybody from real estate here. I think the most pertinent thing to do would be defer this item unless there's some sort of exigent circumstance as to why a contract need to be entered in tonight.
That was a motion to defer. Did I hear a second?
Second.
I'll second.
Moved in second to defer item A, 20A. Deferral trumps. Let's vote on the deferral. Councilman Seekings?
Well, I just asked the council member who's made this motion to defer if you do it with some conditions, that being that we get a report back from our real estate team and find out if there's any other property out there. I mean, not just put it off till the next time.
I'll amend
Let's have
my-
some action on this. I don't think defer, I think we should just vote no on this and go back to the drawing board. But if it's got those conditions, at least we've got some protection.
What is the motion on the floor?
I'll amend my deferral with the conditions that we get a report from real estate about the other properties that we've looked at. And what else, Councilman Seeking, would you like to see done?
I'd like a report on what our options are for our particular needs. And if there's any properties in the city that doesn't cost $6 million, not in North Charleston, it's not blocking the port access road, all the things that this does, it'd be great to hear about it. And
Maybe a memo of the background of how we got to this property and all of the questions that we've asked to be brought back to us before we vote on it. That'd be a condition of my
It's been-
deferral.
Do you, Councilmember Ware?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the comments from my colleagues. This circumvents our procurement process. We're going through a major process of trying to find a home for our public works. And we've got one site and one site only, not to mention all the things that Councilmember Seekings and Griffin has said. That's just not being good stewards of the taxpayers' dollars. How do you get the competitive process involved? We're getting ready later on today to certainly discuss the task force on racial equity and inclusion. How does a minority or a woman or LGBTQ realtor have a shot at providing a site to the city of Charleston if this is the process we're going to use to find a home for our public works? They never have an opportunity. It's kind of reeks of business as usual. There's some other legal aspects to this particular contract that if we were to go forward, we definitely need to have I was going to call for an executive session to discuss. in particular the annexation aspects of it. That said, if you would amend your motion to include that when we go forward looking for a new site, it should be through an RFP process. Go through our procurement process. Put out the objective that the city needs, 10 plus or more acres in the city of Charleston, that hopefully close to major highways, throughways, and put it out there for the realtor, the community, commercial realtor community, come back with these proposals. And then we vet the process that way. But one choice or one choice only is not the way that you should spend in excess of $6 million for a parcel of land that's contaminated, that's not in the city of Charleston. So if somebody would amend that motion to include it
Amend
be
my
involved with an
motion.
RFP process, then I think that's the way we should go about it.
And I'm sure clerk of council is getting that motion for us, right? Okay. And I'm not going to attempt to repeat it. So there's a motion to defer, okay, to include the issues raised by Councilman Seeking, Councilman Griffin, and Councilman Waring. All in favor,
Well,
say.
Mr. Chairman, I guess maybe a point of order. Deferral is one thing, but I think we ought to vote on whether we're going to have a RFP process involved with this or not, because if we're still going to defer and consider the site as being a standalone site only.
Point of order, the deferral is the privilege motion that has to be
I
considered
didn't hear.
first.
Yeah,
The deferral is the privilege motion that has to be considered.
it
first.
is, Mr. Chairman. I'm not debating whether it's a preferred. Councilman Brady is right. The question is, if we're going to have an RFP process, that's part of this motion. How do you have an RFP process if we're going to defer and come back and consider the same site as a standalone issue only? That's the point of order, Mr. Brady. Mr. Brady is right about the privilege motion. But we basically have two motions combined into one.
Correct.
So
Okay.
I'm asking for a ruling on this.
Mr. Chairman.
Chairman,
Councilmember Jackson?
thank you. I'm not sure if I'm the official seconder of the deferral motion, but it seems to me that we've really complicated all of that. So I think I would prefer to withdraw the deferral motion and then just vote this purchase up and down, and then we can start over again if we vote it down. We can't complicate deferrals by all these rabbit trails that I think we're taking ourselves on. And I agree with a lot of the good suggestions for why we would defer, but to me, it seems much cleaner if we just don't go forward with this purchase and basically do the homework that we're requesting.
Okay,
I'll withdraw my deferral because, to be honest, we don't know whether or not there was an RFP because we don't have anybody from real estate here to answer that. So probably best to up or down to start.
so you're
I'll
pulling.
withdraw my
Okay.
deferral.
So we're back at just voting this up or down. Am I correct?
But
Am I correct?
there's no motion or second on the floor.
Pardon?
There's no motion on the floor for that.
Okay. Do I hear a motion? There's a motion to deny. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of voting this down, say aye.
Aye.
Opposes? The ayes have it.
And there is just, was that one nay? Right, and the mayor recused.
You can continue,
Well,
Chairman.
Mr. Chairman,
Thank you,
I
Mr. Chairman.
guess moving forward, I'd like to make a motion that we enter into the RFP process to secure a site for public works.
Do I hear a second? The motion is that we move toward an RFP process with regard to determining what sites may be best available for our Public Works Department.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
So since that was denied, I no longer have a conflict. I do want to share that we've asked Capital Projects to go ahead and begin an RFP to hire a consultant to analyze every square foot of what's at Milford and what needs to move and what else needs to be located. We know that WR Grace is not enough, but we are already embarking on hiring a consultant to help us with that. It hadn't come forward from capital projects yet, but it should soon. And that could be a recommendation, that could include a recommendation on just how much additional real estate we need.
I think hiring a consultant, Mr. Chairman, is one thing. I don't necessarily disagree with that. But if we have an RFP process asking for a certain amount of acres with certain parameters involved with that, I think you put the private sector at work. We got some great commercial realtors that's familiar with the city of Charleston and the surrounding areas. I think we'll get back a number of proposals of sites that may fit. Now, the consultant may come in and say what departments go there or not. I don't necessarily agree with that, but disagree with that, Mr. Mayor. But I think I think we ought to have a multitude of sites coming forth to the city. We vet those sites and vote them up and select one, vote it up or down.
That's a motion on the floor. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Moved and properly seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Nays? The ayes have it. Okay. Continue, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So item, I'm gonna call on Matt, if you would come help me out with the items on C, D, and, I'm sorry, B, C, and D. B is a request for a license agreement with Tour Management Services for the Carolina Belle to operate out of the Charleston Maritime Center. I think this was just at least for another 3 years, Matt, if my notes were correct on that.
Yes, sir. 1 year with 2 1-year renewal options.
Then if I could just go through C and D, Mr. Chairman, if you'd allow me. C was request for approval of a 5-year lease for facilities between the city and Charleston Stage at the Dock Street Theater. This was also to include the lease of existing office space on the 3rd floor, as well as license and use terms and conditions on that. And then finally, on item D, it was request for approval of First Amendment of the management and operating agreement between the city of Charleston and the Charleston Area Visitor Convention and Visitors Bureau as relates to the bus shed, bus rent, and train station, including the parking lot. And Matt, if you can elaborate on any of those three, I'd appreciate those three.
I think the only one that I would elaborate on is the First Amendment with the CACVB. It is 2 parts. The first part is just a cleanup related to the John Street lot. It is taking it from 31 spaces to 28 spaces. Sorry. The first one, the First Amendment, there's 2 parts to that. The first part is a John Street lot. It's a cleanup. Originally, it was 31 spaces. It's now 28 spaces. It's a result of some HVAC equipment and mechanical equipment that's eliminating 3 spaces. The second portion is to lease them the front Meeting Street VRTC lot for the remainder of the management agreement. It starts at $230,000 a year and increases 7.5% and is capped in the last year at $390,000. This amount was negotiated and it keeps the city whole financially.
So I would move for items B, C, and D for approval. That was approved by the committee, Mr. Chairman.
Moved and properly seconded. And that was B, C, and D.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
E is in board.
Okay. Any discussion? Councilmember Seeking.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just, Matt, on B, I know that you've been working on this through Councilmember Del Chapo, but on the agreement, the 1 year with 2 options, did we expand the number of nights that they're going to operate out of there, or did it stay static?
No, all the terms and conditions stayed from the previous 5-year agreement. We changed the years and just some of the financial conditions increased based on it being 5 years.
But no expansion of use?
No expansion of the terms and conditions.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? B, C, and D, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it.
Matt, don't go too far. I think you on this one as well. I believe are you? E is a very convoluted transaction dealing with 0.31 acres of land off of Fishburne and Cumming Street area. This is going to be associated with the potential of developing 6 affordable housing units on this property. It's a land swap. And I don't know who else is here.
Good afternoon, council member.
Yes, there you are, Jonah. Thank you. If you can elaborate on that for us a little bit more, please.
Hi, Gianna.
Hi there, good afternoon. This is not a land swap. This is a transfer of property from SCDOT to the city of Charleston. In February of this year, Chip McQueenie presented a resolution which council approved to allow for us to take ownership of this land from SCDOT. Part of that process included eventually transferring that land to the Charleston Redevelopment Corporation for the development of rental workforce housing in this area. Initially, of course, the goal was to bring or transfer 2 homes that were being given to the city by the Norval developers who are developing property over on Aiken Street, but because of the time frame and the time that it took to secure the land, we were not able to preserve those properties from that area. However, we had begun working with the CRC and the Norval developers late 2019 into 2020. However, we're now finally bringing this to full fruition, and it is 0.31 acres off of the Septima Clark Parkway at Fishburne Street in the West Side community. And again, the goal there is to build new instead of attempting to preserve some housing, rental workforce housing for the city of Charleston residents. Glad to answer any questions. And I would say, because I wasn't at real estate yesterday, SCDOT does not have an appraisal on this site because they were transferring it to the city of Charleston. They would not transfer it naturally to a nonprofit or for-profit without other procedures being in place, but we have one in process. And we'll bring that back to council at the next meeting. Thank you.
And that item was approved as well by the committee, Mr. Chairman. I move for approval on item E.
Okay,
Second.
do I hear a second? Councilmember Jackson?
Yeah, I second, and maybe I spaced out while Ms. Shaw Johnson was speaking, because I was thinking about all the work that she's done today with moving her college student into her new space. But I wanted to make sure that we appreciate that by transferring this land to the CRC, that this will be a permanent affordability. It's community land trust owned property.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Councilwoman Jackson. That's correct.
Any other discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Item G.
Item F was deferred. This was a memorandum of understanding between the city of Charleston and Landmark for the development of the Sumeral Street. This is the former Piggly Wiggly site. We were hoping to get a memorandum of understanding executed from Landmark in time for this meeting. That did not occur. There was been a lot of discussions and negotiations with them concerning this property. I think there's a high level of frustration with this, quite frankly, Mr. Chairman, that we moved to defer, and item F was deferred.
Councilmember Griffin?
When are we expecting this?
Could you speak up a little louder?
When are we expecting this to be ready?
So my frustration, Councilwoman Griffin, was my expectations was this document was going to be ready on July 20th. Then we were promised it would be ready for this meeting in August. We've been at this for a year, and part of the problem, which I respect from Landmark, was put a damper on this project. There were concerns about what was going to be viable from an economic standpoint on this property. Councilwoman Waring suggested we come back and do a presentation with proposal of that. We will certainly do that. We will put on our agenda again for the Revitalization Commission meeting. We'll have it on September the 8th, and for full council to look at it as well. Part of this development would include a civic center at the tip of the property. In my area, what they call the suicide merge area, but it would be a civic center at that area. Landmark would develop a 2-story complex with retail, restaurant, and office space on that property, some green space, and some other amenities for the community. It's a huge investment on this. And like I said earlier, I understood Landmark's hesitation for the commercial part to see how the pandemic was going to shake out. But being that we're still having some high level of frustration with getting them to the table, getting the sign. If they can't come forward with this, I'm ready to pull the plug and start all over again, quite frankly. And I've expressed that to the folks who have been dealing with the Landmark.
Councilman Griffin.
Just as a follow-up, if that's the case, we need to start looking at other options immediately, including hopefully to sell that property. So I would hope that we could we just can't keep playing this waiting game forever and forever. You know, we were all anticipating that this would be on our agenda this month. Now we're going to go another month, and I just don't know how long we can sit there with that property being vacant and consider that a viable option to wait it out. I was hopeful Landmark would be the one, but if they're not, I don't know how. I mean, they were the only ones that submitted a proposal, correct? So if they're not interested, you know, we got to start looking at some other options. And I don't mean next year. I'm talking about next month.
No, Councilman
Mr.
Griffin,
Chairman.
I've been working on this since 2016. It's been a long process in getting to this point. I've shared my anger and frustration with the parties involved in this. I think it's high time that they even need to fish or cut bait. And I've said that to them as clearly as I possibly can. My community in my district is waiting for this to be developed. There's a high level of frustration with this. They know where we stand with this. The city's been very clear with them that we expect them to finish up the negotiations. And I think that if they can't come to the table in September, we cut them loose. And that's just bottom line with it.
Mr. Chairman, I just would report in response to that question. Yesterday at Real Estate Committee, I shared that there was only one outstanding point between the parties that was worked out this morning. So it's ready, but obviously not ready enough in time enough for consideration, given notice, and for council to have an opportunity to review it. So there's nothing standing in the way between having this at our next meeting. Councilmember Waring suggested we have another session to represent the plans that have been brought forward to date. And I think that's a good idea. So if it's okay with council, we'll schedule a special meeting in order to review the plans for Sumeral Street going forward.
I'd like to follow up on something that Councilman Griffin just mentioned. Is there any reason why we just didn't zone it how we want it and put it out there and back away?
So
let the developers do their thing.
We put out the request for folks to bid on it. Landmark was the only one who bid on it. I'm trying to remember my timeline off the top of my head, Mr. Chairman. So we started the process of working with them. We went through this process of going to the community, asking for their input on what they would like to see on this property. We went through that design process. They came through with some conceptual designs, which were consistent and what the community liked to have seen. The debate is what we're having here is part of the negotiations we've been talking about, which included ownership, sale of part of it. We maintain ownership of a portion where we would put our civic center part of it, sell part of it to Landmark. We've gone back and forth with those discussions with them regularly on that. And so everything that we're talking about today is things that we have discussed and have filtered through. We've got to this funnel part, and sometimes I guess when you get to the rubber meets the road, this may be the hardest part of it all. So, you know, if we'll see where they come back in September, hopefully they'll pan out. Hopefully we'll have this special meeting. We can go over the design with full council to see what it looks like. And for those who have not had opportunity to do that, and then I think if they don't come through in September, we go in a different direction.
Okay. Item G.
Councilmember Appel keeps on wanting to expand his district, and item G was annexation of 233 Riverland Drive. That was approved unanimously as well.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Is
And-
it,
That concludes our report, Mr. Chairman.
Is there anything else to come before this committee?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I
Yes,
hate to go back,
Councilmember
I hate to
Ware.
go back to the opaque site, but kind of went to the next item on me kind of quick. Everything that's been said, we've got a third of council that wasn't even on council when that one proposal was made in front of city council. So I agree with the mayor that we should have that proposal presented to everybody, but there may be some ideas that some of the new people on council would come forth with that never had a chance to even be considered, I don't know, 3 years ago, or however long ago it was when we had that proposal. You know, Councilman Seekins came up with an idea some months back ago when he said, you know, I know it's a small site, but rezoning is the PUD, allowing certain out parcels to be what we'd like to attract there. It's a very good idea. Never got a chance to be thought through. There's been some talk about trying to maybe create a parking deck, securing another parcel for that. I think that type brainstorming, if you had a parking deck, then that site turns into something entirely different. So the creative juices that, you know, I said over a year ago, we got some very good minds on this council. I look forward to some of the input from the new people on council, looking at what was proposed at least 3 years ago, but not having a situation where it's presented and then we got to vote on one developer's thought the same night. Thank you.
Any more discussion? We did vote on that item, didn't we? Okay. If there's nothing else to come before this committee, this meeting's adjourned.